She was 84 years old. She had a pacemaker. She took an Uber to her daughter's house that evening because she still liked doing things on her own terms. And sometime before the sun came up, she was gone. Not gone like she wandered off. Not gone like she forgot where she lived. Gone like someone came for her, in the dark, with a plan. The camera at her front door went black at exactly 1:47 in the morning. Her pacemaker lost its signal 41 minutes later. 41 minutes. That is not a number that belongs to panic or impulse. That is a number that belongs to patience, to rehearsal, to people who knew exactly what they were doing and exactly how long they had to do it. What happened inside that house in those 41 minutes has not been fully answered in over 100 days. But the evidence that was left behind, and the evidence that was deliberately not left behind, tells a story far darker and far more calculated than anything the headlines have been willing to say out loud. And tonight, on CAC Crime Trending, we are going to say it. Before we go any further, if you are new here, I need to warn you. This case involves the violent abduction of an elderly woman, forensic evidence pointing to premeditated betrayal by someone she trusted, and details that are going to be deeply disturbing from this point forward. If that is not something you can sit with right now, there is no shame in stepping away. But if you are staying, and I believe most of you are, do one thing for me right now. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, because this channel does not let go of a case until there are answers, and on this one, we are just getting started. And drop a comment below. Tell us where in the world you are watching from tonight. Because what happened to this woman, what was done to this woman, deserves witnesses from every corner of this earth. This is CAC Crime Trending. Stay with me. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She lives alone in the Catalina Foothills neighborhood of Tucson, Arizona, an affluent, quiet stretch of desert in the hills north of the city. She is the mother of 3 adult children: Savannah Guthrie, co-anchor of NBC's Today Show, Annie Guthrie, her eldest daughter, and Cameron Guthrie. She is independent by nature. She does not ask for rides when she can arrange her own. She attends church faithfully, and every Sunday without exception, she logs into her congregation's service, in person or online. She shows up. That consistency matters to the people who know her, and it is the exact reason the alarm was raised on February 1st, 2026, when a churchgoer called the family around 11 in the morning to say Nancy had not appeared for services. For a woman who never missed, that absence meant something was wrong. She has a pacemaker. It connects wirelessly to an application on her phone, transmitting cardiac data in real time. She also has a Nest doorbell camera at her front door. She does not pay for an active cloud recording subscription, meaning the camera can detect motion and send alerts, but it does not continuously store footage. Both of those details will matter significantly as this case develops. On Saturday evening, January 31st, Nancy called an Uber and traveled to her daughter Annie's home for dinner. She arrived at 5:32 in the afternoon. She spent the evening with family, eating and playing games, and when the night wound down, Annie's husband, Tommaso Cioni, drove her home. Sheriff Chris Nanos confirmed to the New York Times that Cioni waited until Nancy was safely inside before leaving. Her garage door opened at 9:48 p.m. and closed at 9:50 p.m. That is the last confirmed moment she was safe inside her home. What followed was silence until the digital record picked back up. At 1:47 a.m., the doorbell camera disconnected. At 2:12 a.m., the camera software detected a person on the property, but no footage was available. At 2:28 a.m., Nancy's pacemaker disconnected from her phone. Family members arrived at 11:56 a.m. Sunday. They found she was gone. The 911 call came in at 12:03 p.m. From 1:47 to 2:28, 41 minutes. That window is where this entire case lives. Consider what 41 minutes actually requires inside a private residence in the dark at 2 in the morning. Investigators believe Nancy was asleep when whoever entered that house came for her. She had to be located in her bedroom, brought under control, and moved through the interior of a home she had lived in for 40 years, through hallways, to the front door, across the porch, through the property gate, and into a waiting vehicle. All of it accomplished without triggering a single noise complaint, without a neighbor calling 911, and without leaving any immediately obvious sign of disturbance visible from the street. Sheriff Nanos himself stated publicly that Nancy could not walk 50 yards by herself. She had physical limitations. She was not a woman who could be quickly or quietly walked out of a building. She had to be carried or physically supported through every step of that exit. Chip Massey, a retired FBI hostage negotiator who appeared on CBS News to analyze the case, noted that managing a medically fragile elderly hostage while simultaneously executing an abduction is an operation that strains the limits of a single person working alone. The physical demands, the navigation, the timing, all of it points toward more than one operator. Former FBI profiler Jim Clemente, who analyzed the doorbell footage and crime scene evidence in a detailed interview with NewsNation's Brian Entin, stated that the suspect appeared fairly sophisticated in planning, but made critical errors at the front door that revealed he was not fully prepared for the camera to be there. That combination of advanced preparation with in-the-moment improvisation is a behavioral signature Clemente associates with someone who had studied the environment but had not accounted for every variable. The Fox flight team obtained drone footage showing what appeared to be smashed floodlights at the rear of Nancy's property. A ransom note sent to a media outlet separately referenced a destroyed floodlight at the home, the two details aligning in a way investigators acknowledged publicly. The front doorbell was disabled. The rear lights were broken. 2 points of the property addressed, in a sequence that suggests the front and rear were not handled by the same person at the same time. The Pima County Sheriff's Department confirmed it was not ruling out that more than one individual was involved. Then there is the medication. Nancy's prescriptions for her heart condition and high blood pressure were found untouched on her kitchen counter. Sheriff Nanos stated publicly that she needed those medications daily, and that going without them for even 24 hours could be fatal. They were left behind. In a crime built around keeping a hostage alive long enough to collect a ransom, that is not an oversight. It is a forensic question investigators have never stopped asking. This crime did not begin at 1:47 in the morning. The evidence says it started months before Nancy ever heard a sound. Investigators did not begin their timeline on February 1st. One of the first things the Pima County Sheriff's Department did after Nancy was reported missing was send requests to neighbors for surveillance footage from a date 20 days earlier, January 11th, between 9 p.m. and midnight. A Ring app alert confirmed by neighbors to both Fox News and People magazine referenced that specific window and noted a suspicious vehicle spotted on Via Entrada, a road near Nancy's home. Sheriff Nanos acknowledged to NBC News in March that investigators had flagged January 11th because Google initially indicated a surveillance image of a masked man at Nancy's doorbell may have been from that date. Google subsequently backed off that assessment and said it could not confirm a specific date for the image. The reason January 11th was flagged has never been fully resolved, but the fact that investigators targeted it precisely, and the Guthrie family publicly referenced it in their own statement, tells you it mattered. Then came January 23rd. A video surfaced on Ring's Neighbors app, originally posted that same day, showing a man deliberately walking backward up to the front door of a home approximately 6.5 miles from Nancy's property. He arrived at around 5 in the morning. To understand why walking backward matters here, you need to understand how residential camera sensors work. Most Ring cameras use passive infrared technology. They detect body heat, trigger, then take 1 to 2 seconds to process and begin recording. When someone approaches walking forward, those opening seconds capture their face directly. Walking backward inverts that entirely. The sensor fires on the back of the person's head. By the time the lens is recording usefully, their face is never visible. This man understood that. He walked backward with deliberate purpose and rang the doorbell. When the homeowner's dog started barking, he left. But he kept his back to the camera throughout the entire retreat, suppressing the instinct to turn toward the noise. That level of behavioral control under a stress trigger does not come from instinct. It comes from rehearsal. 9 days later, the same distinctive black backpack with matching reflective strips appeared on Nancy's front porch. This time, the man walked forward. No hesitation, no testing the environment. January 23rd was the rehearsal. February 1st was the execution. The FBI Phoenix field office released the doorbell footage publicly on February 10th, when FBI Director Kash Patel posted the images and video directly, stating the Bureau had recovered them from residual data in Google's back-end systems. Data that survived despite the camera having no active cloud subscription. On February 12th, the FBI's Operational Technology Division completed forensic analysis of the footage and released an updated suspect description. Male, approximately 5 feet 9 to 5 feet 10 inches tall, average build, dark clothing, ski mask, black nitrile gloves, black 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker pack. Former FBI profiler Jim Clemente, analyzing the footage publicly with News Nation's Brian Entin, identified what appeared to be a tattoo or marking on the underside of the suspect's right wrist, visible only because the suspect, while grabbing nearby brush to block the camera lens, inadvertently extended his arm in a way that revealed it. Clemente stated the suspect was not fully prepared for that camera. Watch how this person moves. He walks directly to the camera. He knows where the nearby plant is. He uses his gloved hand first, then turns and retrieves the brush. Retired Las Vegas Police Lieutenant Randy Sutton described this in an interview with Fox News Digital as the movement of someone with prior familiarity with the space, not a stranger navigating a dark porch for the first time. ABC News, NBC News, and CNN all independently reported through separate law enforcement sources that the suspect had been to the property on prior occasions before the night Nancy vanished. By February 12th, the FBI had logged more than 13,000 public tips. The federal reward stood at $100,000. The Guthrie family's separate offer brought the combined figure to over $1 million. In the weeks that followed, that total grew to more than $1.2 million, with Savannah Guthrie reportedly funding a private investigation at her own expense of $500,000. Numbers like this: $1.2 million in reward money, 13,000 tips, 5 labs running DNA simultaneously, tell you how seriously investigators know this case needs to be treated. Subscribe to CAC Crime Trending right now. We cover what the mainstream news cycle skips. Hit that bell icon. You will not want to miss what comes next. When the DNA from the gloves found 2 miles from Nancy's home was submitted to the Combined DNA Index System, the FBI's national database containing more than 19 million offender profiles, the result came back with no match. Then investigators confirmed that additional DNA recovered from inside Nancy's home was separately analyzed. That sample also produced no match in the national database. But the 2 profiles were distinct from each other. The DNA found on the glove was different from the DNA found inside the property. 2 separate crime scene locations, 2 separate unknown individuals, neither in the system. The sample from inside the house presented an additional forensic challenge. Sheriff Nanos confirmed the DNA recovered from the scene was a mixture. Genetic material from more than one person layered together, and that separating those strands while preserving enough sample for potential defense testing was a complex, time-sensitive process. That is not a standard laboratory task. Mixed DNA requires a methodology that isolates individual profiles without consuming the material in the process, because if the evidence is destroyed during extraction, it cannot be retested. A private Florida laboratory, DNA Labs International, based in Deerfield Beach, had been working with the Pima County Sheriff's Department from the start of the investigation. That lab transferred its sample to the FBI in April 2026, And sources familiar with the investigation confirmed to ABC News that the FBI is now applying new forensic technology to analyze the material. The Bureau is believed to be targeting Astrea Forensics, a San Francisco-based laboratory that helped build the DNA profile that identified the Gilgo Beach serial killer. Leading genetic genealogist Cece Moore stated publicly that Astrea is, in her words, by far the safest option for recovering usable data from degraded or rootless hair samples. Sheriff Nanos told a local neighborhood watch group that it could take 6 more months to separate the strands and isolate what investigators need, and confirmed that as many as 5 labs across the country are simultaneously working on the biological evidence from this case. When Nanos spoke to KOLD-TV on June 1, 2026, he addressed the question of why no arrests had been made directly. He said, "We want to make sure that DNA doesn't just identify a suspect, it also exonerates those who are innocent. So it's a tedious process, we get that. And especially when you add in all the other complexities of one DNA on top of the other and the separation of that. It moves at a snail's pace, I guess, for some. But for my investigative team and for me, we look at it as this is doing exactly what we need it to do. Investigative genealogy is where this DNA evidence becomes exponential. If a usable profile is extracted from the mixed sample inside the home, it does not need to match anyone in the criminal database to identify a suspect. Consumer ancestry platforms like 23andMe and Ancestry DNA hold hundreds of millions of genetic profiles from people who submitted samples voluntarily. A single distant cousin, a 3rd or 4th generation relative who once took a holiday DNA kit, can provide enough of a genetic bridge to trace a profile back to a specific family tree. 2 unknown profiles in this case means 2 independent family trees. 2 separate chances for one match to surface in a database the suspect never knew existed. The digital trail runs parallel to the biological one. Morgan Wright, CEO of the National Center for Open and Unsolved Cases, told Fox News Digital that he believes the solution to this case will come from technical analysis. New ways of processing data the perpetrators assumed was gone. Cell tower records log which devices connected to which towers and when, placing phones at geographic coordinates with timestamps that do not require a confession. Address searches conducted on personal devices leave server logs. GPS data from vehicles can survive even when a phone is powered off, if the device was ever connected to the car's system. Mayer said about the suspects, "These guys came prepared not to leave hair or DNA. Look at how that guy was clothed. They turned off their cell phones." Turning off a cell phone creates a record of its own, a gap in the signal pattern that itself becomes a data point. Mayer told News 4 Tucson, "This is a very high-caliber investigation, and I think the FBI is going to crack the case." About 24 Pima County and FBI investigators remain actively working the Guthrie case, with daily joint briefings ongoing. Sheriff Nanos has stated his belief plainly: an arrest will be made. Dominic Evans is 48 years old. He is a 5th-grade elementary school teacher in Tucson, Arizona. He is a father. He is the founding drummer of a Tucson indie band called Early Black, which formed in April 2007 through a Craigslist ad and a newspaper posting. For 19 years, he shared that band's stage with its bassist, a man named Tommaso Cioni. When the FBI released its updated suspect description on February 12th, online investigators began mapping it against publicly available photographs and footage of Evans. The results of that comparison generated the most sustained and intense public scrutiny of any individual connected to this case outside of the Guthrie family itself. The FBI described the suspect as male, approximately 5 feet 9 to 5 feet 10 inches tall, average build, with facial hair, specifically a mustache or goatee, partially visible beneath the ski mask. Former FBI Supervisory Special Agent and criminal profiler Jim Clemente, analyzing the doorbell footage publicly, identified what appeared to be a marking, possibly a tattoo, visible on the suspect's right wrist, and stated it could help investigators rule in and rule out potential suspects. Online investigators, who reviewed early Black's performance footage from local Tucson shows, identified a marking on Evans's right wrist consistent with what Clemente had flagged. Height, build, facial hair, and the wrist detail. All 4 points from the FBI's forensic description mapping onto one man's publicly documented appearance. Then there is the criminal record. The Pima County Judicial Database contains felony entries for Evans: burglary, robbery, theft, and embezzlement. Burglary is the unlawful entry into a structure. Robbery is the taking of property from a person by force or intimidation. Read those two definitions carefully against what investigators believe happened inside Nancy's home on February 1st. And the operational overlap is not subtle. Now consider the forensic silence. The DNA recovered from the glove 2 miles from the scene, and the separate DNA from inside the house, both returned no match from the national database of 19 million profiles. For a person with no criminal history, that result is straightforward. They were simply never entered. But for a man with multiple felony convictions, the absence requires an explanation. Arizona's DNA collection laws for convicted felons have evolved significantly over the years. Convictions entered before the relevant mandatory collection statutes took effect, or cases resolved through plea agreements that did not specifically trigger a biological sample requirement, can leave a person with a documented criminal history and no corresponding genetic profile in the national system. A felony record that is forensically invisible. Evans told the New York Times that he had met Nancy Guthrie only once, in 2011, when he brought his son to an Easter egg hunt at her home. He said he learned about her disappearance from Instagram and privately messaged Tommaso to offer his support. He spoke with investigators approximately a week into the case for about 40 minutes and has not heard from them since. When asked about the online harassment that followed, Evans said, "I feel like someone's taken my name. I don't know. Monetary, clickbait, to be relevant, entertainment. But there are innocent people that get hurt." Sheriff Nanos responded publicly, "He's going through hell, and it is horrible. And I don't know what to tell him except he probably should be speaking with some attorneys and sue some of these people for libel." Evans has not been named a person of interest. He has not been charged. The Pima County Sheriff's Department cleared all Guthrie family members and their spouses. Evans is not a family member, and his status has never been formally resolved in either direction. The band Early Black recorded its debut album in late 2009 at Loveland Studios in Tucson. That album was released in 2010. Its title was Life: Love: Love: Murder. That is a documented fact, not evidence of anything. It is noted here for what it is. But here is what Evans alone cannot answer. The person who entered Nancy's home on February 1st did not just resemble someone. They moved through that property with knowledge of the camera positions, the gate, the rear lights, the floor plan, the pacemaker, the timing. That is not information that comes from a single Easter egg hunt in 2011. That knowledge required years of regular, trusted access to that home. It required someone who had walked through Nancy's front door hundreds of times, who sat at her table, who knew her daily medication, who knew her daughter's broadcast schedule. Evans has never held that access. Someone else in this story has. That is where the next chapter goes. Tommaso Cioni is 50 years old. He was born on June 18, 1975, in San Giovanni Valdarno, a town in the Tuscany region of Italy. He moved to Tucson in 2006, the same year he married Annie Guthrie. He has lived 4 miles from Nancy's home for nearly 20 years. He teaches 6th grade science and AP biology at Basis Oro Valley, a charter school in Tucson. He plays electric bass, writes informally, studies lizards, makes homemade pasta. He is, by every public description, a quiet and private man. And he is the last confirmed person to have seen Nancy Guthrie alive. Set aside names, set aside suspicion, look only at what this crime required in terms of prior knowledge, and then ask who in Nancy's life was positioned to possess it. The wrought iron security gate at Nancy's property shows no tool marks, no sign of force. It was either left unlocked by a woman who had felt safe in her home for 40 years. Entirely possible. Or it was open because the last person to walk her through it, 4 hours before the camera went dark, ensured it would be. That is not an accusation. That is the forensic reality of an unforced entry. The cameras. The Nest doorbell system at Nancy's front door had no active cloud recording subscription. As documented in Chapter 2, the cameras could detect motion and send alerts but stored nothing continuously, which is why the FBI had to work directly with Google to extract residual data from back-end servers. That is not information on Nancy's utility bill. It is the kind of detail known to someone who spent regular evenings in her home and noticed, over the years, that she had never paid for the recording subscription. The pacemaker. Nancy's cardiac device synced wirelessly to her phone in real time. That was not a publicly known detail before the case broke. It is the kind of medical fact shared at a family dinner table. The person who abducted Nancy disconnected from her phone at 2:28 in the morning, meaning they knew that timeline was running, and they moved accordingly. NBC Universal announced on September 23, 2025, that Savannah Guthrie would co-host the opening ceremony of the Milan Cortina 2026 Winter Olympics on February 6 alongside Terry Gannon. That announcement was public, made months in advance, and covered across television and entertainment media. Nancy vanished the night of January 31st, 5 days before the ceremony. Savannah had been scheduled to travel to Milan for the broadcast, but withdrew from the assignment to remain with her family after Nancy's abduction. Whoever selected January 31st as the night to move on Nancy's home chose the exact window when the most publicly connected, most media-visible member of the Guthrie family had been scheduled to be on the other side of the Atlantic for the biggest broadcast assignment of her year. Olympic hosting schedules are finalized and announced months in advance. That date was not chosen at random. Then there is the AP Biology classroom. Cioni teaches PCR amplification, the exact technique forensic labs use to duplicate and analyze crime scene DNA. His students run gel electrophoresis, the process that builds the genetic profiles entered into CODIS. His classroom supply list includes nitrile gloves, the same type worn by the masked suspect on Nancy's porch, the same type whose discarded pair was found 2 miles from the scene. Someone who instructs this material every week understands not just the theory of DNA transfer, but the practical application. What surfaces retain usable profiles? What conditions degrade evidence? What distance and method of disposal reduces the likelihood of recovery? The glove was not dropped in a panic outside Nancy's gate. It was found 2 miles away, in a direction away from the house, positioned at a calculated distance. What investigators did next tells its own story. The blue Honda CR-V connected to Annie and Tommaso, the vehicle Cioni drove when he took Nancy home on January 31st, was impounded and subjected to an extraordinary level of forensic examination. Reports confirmed that the car was not simply searched, but dismantled. Interior panels removed and examined individually. The vehicle then reassembled at a mechanic shop under law enforcement supervision. As of March 11, 2026, the Pima County Sheriff's Department confirmed to Parade that the vehicle had not been returned to the family. Investigators returned to Annie and Tommaso's home on multiple separate occasions. Items were removed in brown paper bags, the standard for preserving biological evidence. Security cameras were taken from the property. All of this independently confirmed. Cioni was last photographed publicly on February 3rd. 2 days after Nancy disappeared, seen briefly in his car with Annie as they returned home, covering his face. Reporter Brian Enton noted publicly that Cioni had not been seen for the better part of a week in the days following the abduction, while Savannah, Annie, and Cameron all made public statements and appeared on camera. Every member of the Guthrie family spoke. Cioni did not. When speculation about Cioni intensified online in April 2026, former FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffindaffer publicly pushed back, warning that much of the online scrutiny appeared to be driven by appearance-based assumptions, rather than confirmed forensic evidence. A document circulated online showed that Cioni signed a durable power of attorney on May 16, 2025, giving Annie control over his financial and property affairs. Legal experts noted that such documents are routine in real estate transactions. The document is dated approximately 8 months before Nancy's abduction. Its existence is a matter of public record. In February 2026, journalist Ashley Banfield reported on her podcast that a law enforcement source had described Cioni as a potential prime suspect in the case. The Pima County Sheriff's Department responded by publicly clearing all Guthrie family members and their spouses. Banfield's report was not independently verified by other outlets. Savannah Guthrie has stated publicly that both Annie and Tommaso cared deeply for her mother and would never harm her. No charges have been filed. No suspect has been publicly named. Cioni's exact height has never been confirmed on the record. Everything written in this chapter is drawn from documented public reporting, and nothing here constitutes an accusation of any kind. This investigation is still active. Nancy Guthrie has been missing for over 4 months, and no one has been charged. If you want a channel that stays on a story like this until there are real answers, subscribe to CAC Crime Trending. Hit the bell. Share this video with someone who needs to see it. 3 days after Nancy was reported missing, media outlets confirmed they had received ransom letters. The notes were sent to Arizona television stations KOLD and KGUN and to TMZ. According to multiple sources familiar with the situation, the letter specified 2 separate figures: $4 million in Bitcoin due by Thursday, February 5th, and if that deadline passed without payment, the demand would increase to $6 million by Monday, February 9th. Both deadlines came and went without confirmed payment. At the February 5th press conference, FBI Special Agent in Charge Heath Jank addressed the ransom directly. He confirmed investigators were taking the media-sent notes seriously and conducting forensic and digital analysis of the Bitcoin wallet addresses and email metadata. He also confirmed that one arrest had already been made: a separate individual with no genuine knowledge of the case who had fabricated a ransom note to profit from the situation. Janka said plainly, it was someone trying to profit from it, a total imposter. The Guthrie family, in a video posted on February 8th, said they had received a message and were ready to engage. But they needed proof of life first, noting that in a world of AI-manipulated voices and images, they had to be certain Nancy was alive before taking any further steps. On blockchain data reviewed around February 10th, a small transaction of approximately $152 in Bitcoin was recorded to the wallet listed in one of the notes. Law enforcement has never confirmed who sent it or whether it carries any evidentiary meaning. Now consider what the dollar figures actually reveal. $4 million with a 5-day deadline, escalating to $6 million on the 9th. That is not how a stranger constructs a demand. A stranger picks a round, aspirational number. 4 million and 6 million reflect a specific calculation: the gap between what a nationally recognized television anchor appears to be worth publicly and what she could realistically convert into liquid assets within 72 hours. That level of financial precision points to someone who understood not just that the Guthrie family had resources, but the practical ceiling of what those resources could produce under pressure. The Bitcoin wallet at the center of the demand produced no significant movement. No large sums were ever moved through it. If money were the genuine objective, the people behind the abduction would have been watching that wallet every hour. Its silence, combined with the life-sustaining medications left on Nancy's kitchen counter, builds a picture of a ransom that was constructed as misdirection, not as a financial instrument. Something designed to keep investigators looking at cryptocurrency wallets while the actual evidence aged in a desert. Tad DiBiase, a former federal prosecutor who has spent 20 years specializing in no-body murder prosecutions, told journalist Brian Enton that the absence of comprehensive documented physical searches is a twofold problem for any future case. When you go to trial, you want to be able to say to the jury, here's all the searches we did, and we confirmed that there's no way that she walked away on her own. There's no way that she escaped. There's no way that she committed suicide. Because you don't know that unless you've done a very thorough search. Without that documentation, a defense attorney walks into court and plants exactly that doubt. The cadaver dog searches conducted by the Pima County Sheriff's Department were paused approximately 5 weeks after the abduction. They have not resumed on any documented large-scale basis. DiBiase also noted that 54% of no-body murder cases he has studied involved people in a domestic relationship, and a substantial additional portion involved people who knew each other, friends, roommates, business associates. A genuine stranger-on-stranger abduction of an adult removed from a private residence, with no ransom collected and no remains found, represents an extraordinarily rare profile in his 20 years of casework. The United Cajun Navy, a nationally recognized volunteer search and rescue organization, submitted a formal 41-page operational plan to Sheriff Nanos in the days following the abduction. The plan proposed deploying drone teams, K-9 units, and thermal imaging equipment across desert terrain, including areas near the Mexican border, entirely under the sheriff's command with no independent authority. As of April 2026, the organization's incident commander, Josh Gill, confirmed, "We have not been contacted on the plan that we provided." The sheriff's office stated it had responded to the group on multiple occasions and called contrary reporting inaccurate. No public explanation was given for why the offer was never accepted. Khloe Kardashian, appearing on the Crime Junkie podcast with host Ashley Flowers, said, "I can't understand that in 2026 there's not one piece of information. They're not telling us." Sheriff Nanos responded through KOLD, "Yes, absolutely, there are secrets. But it's not done because we got to keep it a secret. It's done because we got to protect our case." The Strategolias family lives on Camino Real, a residential back road that cuts through the Catalina foothills roughly 2.5 miles from Nancy's home. The road avoids every major intersection between her neighborhood and the main arteries out of the area. It connects only to East River Road. If someone left Nancy's property at 2:28 in the morning and wanted to move south without passing a traffic camera or a busy junction, Camino Real was the logical route. Elias and Danielle Strategolias had a street-facing Ring camera. Between midnight and 6 a.m. on February 1st, it recorded 12 vehicles passing. One of them appeared at 2:36 a.m. traveling south. When NBC News correspondent Liz Kreutz asked Sheriff Nanos directly whether investigators had identified the car that drove past at 2:36 a.m., he answered, "No." She asked if they were working to identify it. He confirmed they were. Google Maps confirms the drive from Nancy's home to the Strategolias camera location takes approximately 7 minutes. Nancy's pacemaker disconnected at 2:28. Add 7 minutes and you arrive at 2:35. The vehicle appeared at 2:36, a 1-minute margin, consistent with a brief pause at the end of Nancy's street before pulling away. Retired NYPD Detective Pat Brosnan reviewed the footage and assessed the vehicle as consistent with a Kia Soul. The Strategolias home sits just outside the 2-mile canvassing radius that investigators had established. No investigator knocked on their door in the 25 days following the abduction. They came forward on their own after watching the news, checked their own camera, and turned the footage over to the FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Department. Fox News Digital approached 5 other homes with street-facing cameras on Camino Real after the story broke. 3 homeowners confirmed no law enforcement had visited them either. That vehicle was traveling south. South on Camino Real leads to East River Road, then to Interstate 19, a direct corridor toward Rio Rico, approximately 60 miles from the Mexican border crossing at Nogales. CBS News confirmed the FBI sub-office most relevant to the Guthrie case is in Hermosillo, Sonora, the Mexican state that shares a border with Arizona. In the days following the release of the doorbell footage, a man was detained during a traffic stop in Rio Rico, and investigators conducted a court-authorized search of a location there. The man was released. The search yielded no publicly announced findings. As of June 2026, Nancy Guthrie has been missing for more than 4 months. No arrests, no named suspect. 5 labs working DNA simultaneously. On June 7, 2026, KVOA News 4. Tucson confirmed that the memorial that had stood outside Nancy's home in the Catalina foothills since February had been taken down. The community responded with immediate outrage across social media, with many people questioning who had removed it and why. The reward stands at $1.2 million. The tip line is 1-800-CALL-FBI. Nancy Guthrie was born Nancy Ellen Long on January 27, 1942, in Fort Wright, Kentucky. She was 84 years old. She was a grandmother, a woman of deep and consistent faith, a person who never missed a Sunday service and called her own Ubers because she liked doing things independently. The Sunday she did not appear for church was the Sunday her family knew something was wrong. That one detail, a missed church service from a woman who never missed, tells you more about who she was than any headline could. The math is still closing in. 2 DNA profiles mean 2 family trees. Forensic genealogy requires only one distant cousin in a consumer ancestry database to build a bridge back to a name. Cell towers log gaps. GPS records survive. Every operation built on more than one person is only as durable as the silence of its least committed partner. The first one to speak gets the deal. The second one takes everything. Subscribe to CAC Crime Trending. Share this video. The more people who understand this evidence, the more pressure on everyone who knows something. Drop a comment. Tell us where in the world you are watching from and what you think the evidence is pointing to. We read every single one.